Of kids coming in and having no concept of what Korean War was like.
Okay.
And then they want to look at it.
All right, this is an interview at the New York State Military Museum, Saratoga Springs, New York. It is the 23rd of August, 2004, 9 a.m. The interviewers are Mike Russert and Wayne Clark. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Donald Dwayne Hamilton, 7/16/32, and I live in Elmira, New York. Is this what you...
Where were you born? Were you born?
Elmira, New York.
Oh, no, Elmira, okay. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
I just graduated from high school.
Okay. Did you enlist or were you drafted?
Well, believe it or not, I enlisted in the Navy, and they turned me down because I had a hernia. And so we came home, my buddy and I came home, and I wasn't satisfied because all the rest of my buddies were gone, so I enlisted in the Marines. And they took me because they said they'd fix the hernia.
Okay. Why did you select the Navy first?
I really don't know, because water never really impressed me that much, you know. But everybody else was gone, and I wanted to go too, and the kids were going to throw us a party, so they threw us a party, and, you know, and when we left, I thought, well, geez, I better make a go of it. And then we came home the next day and took all their presents back to us.
How about the Marines? Why did you select them? Any reason with that either?
No reason at all. I just wanted to go into service. Yeah. So I did enlist. I enlisted for 3 years.
They fix your hernia?
Just before I got out. Just before, so it didn't have any effect on me, you know. They just wanted to know, can you hold a rifle? Sure, you know.
Okay.
So what was basic training like? Was it?
It was at Paris Island, Carolinas, and it was a lot different than it is today because at one point, this was after I got out of the service. There was some drill instructor led his whole troop or his whole, platoon through a swamp, and I guess there was 3 or 4 people that were lost.
I remember that. I was in...
Lost or drowned or something. And so consequently, since then, they softened up a lot of things, but it was really tough. Boot camp was really tough then. I mean, they just did some real weird things. I had a drill instructor that he'd go out, every night and get drunk, and he'd come back, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, he'd wake us all up, have us form in the company street, and then he'd have us do all kinds of stupid things like run up and run around in a circle, and or if he had a grudge against somebody, he might make somebody wrestle the strongest guy in the platoon, and everybody would lose but this kid. It was strange. It was tough. It really was tough. I can tell you, stories like I remember one time a kid wanted to talk to the drill instructor, and it was a regular routine we had to go through, which was knock on their door. We lived in Quonset huts, and the routine was you knocked on the door 3 times, and the drill instructor would holler out, and he'd say, "Get in here." And you take 3 steps inside, and you uncover, take your hat off, and you say, "Private such and such would like to speak to the drill instructor." Well, when the kid went up to the Quonset hut, he knocked on the door 3 times, and the drill instructor hollered out. He says, "I want to hear 10." And the kid thought he said 10, so he knocked 10 times on the door. And the only thing I saw, because we was out in Company Street shining our shoes, and all I saw was a hand come out and grab this kid by the front of the shirt, and you heard bang, bang, bang on the end of the Quonset hut. And then the next thing I saw, the guy's throwing him out in the streets, coming out, and he hit the cinders and everything with his hands and knees. And he's crying. He never did get to talk to the drill instructor. So it was tough. It really was tough.
Now you were, what, 20 years old?
Yes.
Okay. Was this your first time away from home?
Yes.
How did you feel about that?
I felt kind of proud because I thought I was doing something for my country,
Did you get homesick at all, or?
No, because I think I've been a person that's always been able to adapt, no matter what the situation was, because, I don't get too upset about things, when I had to change certain ways.
How long were you on Paris Island?
16 weeks, I think. I won't swear to that, though.
What kind of weapons were you trained with?
M1s.
M1s, okay.
Yeah.
All right, where did you go from Paris Island?
From Paris Island, Camp Lejeune. Camp Lejeune. Then from Camp Lejeune,
What did you do at Camp Lejeune?
Well, I went to school for a heavy equipment.
Okay.
And they were training me how to run bulldozers and stuff like this, you know, and then all of a sudden, I didn't know that I wasn't doing that bad, or I thought I was doing better than they thought I was, or something like that, but they come along and they said, we're going to put you in the artillery. And so I started training for artillery, and then they sent me to Camp, what is it out in California? Which one is it?
Pendleton?
Pendleton, Camp Pendleton. And that's where I trained to go overseas, in Korea. And one of my buddies his name was Pat Tepp. I remember that. He was a kid that had to have a tattoo on every part of his body, you know. That's how I ended up with this. Because he said I was a chick and I didn't go. We went to town every time we could get liberty. And he said, let's go get a tattoo. And I said, I don't want those tattoos. He says, you're gutless. You don't have any, you're not courage enough. Well, yes, I am. It cost me $1. And that's what it says, buck.
Now, when you were out in Pendleton, what kind of artillery did you train on? What kind of?
Well, I didn't really train for artillery there. I just, it was more of a familiarization type thing than anything else, say. Right. Because they familiarized us out there with tanks, and, you know, you get to drive a tank, you get to use a bazooka, and just not really to do that. But when I went overseas, then they stuck me in the King Battery.
Okay. Now, were you trained on primarily World War II equipment then?
And believe it or not, the Marine Corps was all used equipment that the Army was discarding because they get new equipment. This is how the Marine Corps worked. We always got the secondary equipment that nobody else wanted. And we'd have to repair it or whatever, and I always thought that was unjust because we never got any new stuff, but didn't make any difference.
When did you end up going overseas?
In 52, I think. I was over there for 13 months, and I was there at the ceasefire and I think that was in 53, if I'm not mistaken. That's when, and I was there when they had the ceasefire.
What part of Korea did you go to?
I wasn't too far from Seoul, and that's always impressed me too, because I saw a picture of Seoul, capital of Korea, here not too awful long ago, and it looked a good deal like New York City. When I was over there, I don't think you could have seen a two-story building. And it was just, you know, people were running around with rubber shoes on or something. And it was cold.
A lot of snow over there?
It was cold. It was, I don't know if there was an awful lot of snow, but it was extremely cold.
What time of year did you go over?
I was over there for 13 months, and well, I can't tell you when. I must have come back around February, I think. But I don't remember.
Did you have much interaction with the Korean people?
I was in the artillery. Me and a couple buddies of mine, we went up to the main line of defense one time, you know, the trench line. And that impressed me because it was, looked like a big city dump out there, you know, from the enemy's trench line to our trench line. And the bunkers that they had built into those trench lines.
So by the time you went into Korea, it was pretty much that static trench line warfare.
Right. Seeing how much ground we can take with night missions and so on and so forth. We fired in the artillery there. We fired on there was 3 hills, and all the advancing positions were called hills. Like, for instance, they were called Reno, Vegas, Carson, you know, Bull Run or whatever. And these were positions that they tried to take at night when they would do reconnaissance and so on and so forth. And we used to fire on them all the time. And when they was advancing for those 3 outposts particularly, we fired for 3 days and 3 nights around the clock. In fact, as we burned out gun barrels, 155 millimeter Howard gun barrels, because we were firing them so fast. And we had mountains of canisters, powder canisters that threw the projectile out, you know.
Now, did you have to, like, load the powder in bag, was the powder in bags, and then you put the projectile in? You
put the projectile in first, and then there was increments on this powder bag if they wanted a, you know, a high explosive, or they wanted to send it to they had the increments, and you knock the increments off. There was 3 strings that come up around those powder bags, and you knock on the increment, whatever the charge they wanted, say, and you throw that in behind the shell, close the breech.
How did you replace a gun tube?
they had a regular ordnance team that would come, and they tried to put down one gun at a time so the rest of the 6 could fire, the rest of the 5 could fire, you know.
Okay, so you had 6 in your battery.
6 in a battery.
Okay.
Did they use a crane to change the
Well, they had,
barrels?
I was mobile stuff naturally, but it was heavy enough to lift the barrel off.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
How long would it take to replace a barrel?
Oh, good heavens. Not too awful
Approximately.
long, not too awful long, maybe 2 or 3 hours or something like that.
Okay. Now, were you basically fighting the Chinese at that time?
Yes.
Okay.
Did you ever have any?
Well, the Koreans, North Koreans.
Did you ever have any direct contact with the enemy? I mean, they didn't overrun your position or?
No,
or
because
try
we
to-
were behind the main line of resistance.
Okay.
The artillery was.
Now, could you describe how your battery was set up in position? Did you have sandbags around you?
Oh,
or
yeah.
Were you dug in?
Yeah, you were. They called it indefinite. Well, forget it. Behind something, so they couldn't see the gun blast.
Oh, okay.
See,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, there was all sandbagged, and then we had the powder pit and the ammo pit because they kept those separate on each side of the bunker, right side of the gun pit. And then they had netting, camouflage netting over those, and you had to throw it back so that the muzzle could, and the backblast, the hitting of the trails and so on and so forth, and the repercussion there.
Now, did you live in bunkers next to the
Right.
the gun emplacements?
Well, the gun in place, we was probably, I would say probably 30, 35 yards from the gun pit itself, where was our bunker, where we lived.
Now, that time period where you were firing so much, did you ever get rest? Did you exchange crews? Did you rotate crews, or did you just keep on
Well, we tried to take
battery
turns.
the whole time?
We tried to take turns where we'd get an hour's sleep or something like that, and someone would replace us, because there was, I don't know, probably about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, probably 8 to 10 guys on one gun, that I had to operate the thing.
How were you able to sleep with those guns going off?
Oh, you got so tired you just slept.
Uh-huh.
It's like listening to a blaring radio right next to you when you're trying to sleep, I guess. I don't know.
Did it ever affect your hearing at all over the years?
No. Lots of times you'd get wet powder or something like that, and you'd get a backblast. And I remember one time our CO came over. This was when we was firing around the clock. And our CO's coming around checking, trying to get copy to us and stuff like that. And he didn't realize, he just stepped up to us behind the gun, and we're still firing. And one shell was pulled off naturally, and the powder was wet, and it felt like somebody threw a handful of sand right at you just as hard as they could, stung. And he was facing that. Of course, everybody else on the gun crew turned their back. And he says, "Wow." Towards his face and walked away. I'm thinking, wow. Yeah.
Now, how were you fed when you were up in the front, in your area?
They tried to give us at least one hot meal a day, but the rest of the time was kind of like, I don't know, just grab it and run.
What was it? Your food shipped in like the hot meals in like a Mermaid can or something, or was there a mess hall?
I don't remember that they, because we always had a mess hall,
Okay.
and each gun battery would have a gun. There were 6 guns on in each battery.
Okay.
And my gun battery was King battery. I can't even tell you who the other 2 batteries were in the battalion. I can't even tell you who they were, what their names were. But I was on gun 2, and I have a hard time remembering any of the guys' names. I know there was one kid that looked a good deal like me, and everybody thought we were brothers. I think his name was Hoos. And I remember a kid by the name of Gonzalez, because him and I had a tussle one time because I was the corporal in charge of the tent at the time because our sergeant had gotten wounded or something. And the OD came along, which is the officer of the day. He came along, he says, "Lights out," because we was living in tents at the time. So it was my job to make sure the lights went out, and half of the guys were a little bit tipsy. And this Gonzalez gave me a hard time because he was a little bit inebriated. And he was going to knock my eyes out, or, put my lights out, And I said, "Look, if you feel the same way in the morning, I'll tussle with you. But right now, turn the lights out and go to bed." It was this is, let's say, there's funny little things, you know, that's...
Did you ever have any blacks in your unit? The Army just started to be integrated at that time.
Fact is, I had one kid that was a real good friend of ours. His name was, what the heck was it? It was a funny name. But he was a great guy. He really was a great guy. We used to go on the outpost and sleep, you know, on the perimeter. And they had put up a little tent, and we used to sleep. And I remember one time that we was in the night time, and we'd take turns. We'd sleep 4 hours and get up and watch for 4 hours. And I remember one time it was my turn to watch, and so he jumped in the sleeping bag, and he went to sleep. And I'm sitting there, and I'm watching this mouse run up and down his chest. I didn't wake him up or anything. I just sat there and watched this mouse playing all over this guy's chest. He never moved. He just slept. You know, you talk about the gunfight. Didn't it wake you up or something? It woke you up, but you went back to sleep.
Now, when you were on outposts or when you were in your battery, what kind of side weapons did you carry?
I don't think I had a 38 one time, or a 32, I guess it was. But seldom went out of the holster, and you only wore that when you went out on the outpost.
Did you have any other weapon?
Oh yeah, we always had our M1. You never separated from your M1. You went to the bathroom, you took your M1 with you.
Did you ever have any Republic of Korea troops near you?
We used to have. In fact, I had a crew one time, and they were laying barbed wire for us. And I couldn't speak their language, they couldn't speak my language, so it was more of a charade type thing, you know. I had to try to direct these 4 or 5 guys and tell them to put the barbed wire here or whatever, you know, and they just nod and do, you know. But they were, I think they were South Koreans, they were, you know, on our side, supposed to be on our side.
How did you feel about the South Korean Army? Did you have any...
We didn't have any, no, we didn't have any contact with them.
Were you there when MacArthur was relieved? Or was he relieved prior?
MacArthur, he was, gosh, I don't know. I know we had and I'm trying to think of the present, I know we had a big parade for him one time over there. Of course, we went way back and had this parade, and boy, there was all the national troops that was involved in the war. We did a parade for him. And we used to go out each morning to my master sergeant. He picked out who we wanted, and I happened to be one of them. And I didn't appreciate it at all, so... And we'd go out each morning, get in the truck, and go out each morning to practice this marching thing, you know. And I thought to myself one morning, I says, I'm going to make myself scarce when the truck leaves. So what I did was I went down to the supply tent, was talking to the sergeant down there, and the truck left. And of course, when the top came back and the truck with the rest of the guys in, he dug me up and he found me. And he says, where were you when the truck left? And I says, I was down to the supply tent, Sarge. I had to get a new t-shirt, whatever it was. I went down there to get. And he says, really? He says, and this was on the Marine Corps birthday, believe it or not. And it's the only time they ever tried to put forth any kind of an effort so that, you know, you could celebrate the birthday, the Marine Corps birthday, because they'd give you cake and ice cream, which you never got, you see. And so... So he says, you're going to be working on the Marine Corps birthday, and believe it or not, I was digging slit trenches all day long. You know, where you set the head, where you, outhouses.
Now, how was your equipment, your uniform, so on? Were you ever cold? Do you think you had enough equipment?
No, I think they, you know, it's best that they could provide, really, because they were adequate, yeah. I think most of the troops have always been really taken care of in good shape. Because I don't think don't you think so? Yeah.
How did you feel being there when you knew they were talking and over to have an armistice or a treaty signed, and I think there were land grabs, I know they were going on trying to take territory and so on. How did you feel about that going on when you knew there were talks, peace talks going on at the same time?
Well, the only thing that I can remember is the fact that the day the news came down to all the troops over there that they had signed an armistice, we didn't feel any armistice because they were still firing. But we were told not to fire back, not to counter battery, see? So Well, do you believe him or not, you know? You just go through his emotions, that's all.
How long did it take before
Before they stopped firing stuff,
firing?
I would say probably 2 or 3 days.
So you were under fire basically for several days without
Oh,
returning fire.
Right, right, yeah. So you just hunker down and get in your bunker and stay there and wash your clothes when you could. And it was kind of like camping, you know.
Did you ever see any USO shows while you were over?
You didn't see Bob Hope or?
No, I never saw Bob Hope. I was trying, seems like I saw one, but I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
No, maybe we didn't. I know. Mm-mm. But then again, I don't remember. So.
Now you were discharged in February '55. Did you stay in Korea until then, or did you
No,
come back?
no, I was back. Came back just about a year before my enlistment was over, and that's when they put me in St. Albans Naval Hospital and fixed my hernia. And then from the hospital, I went back to Bayonne, New Jersey, and I was an MP at Bayonne, New Jersey until I was discharged.
Now you had some photographs with you. Want to tell us about some of you? I know you have a large album full of photographs, but are there some that you'd like to tell us a little bit about? Like maybe that one. Oops.
That's all right. This one here was my gun crew.
If you hold it up, you know, in front of you like this, Wayne can focus on it.
This one here.
You got to
Oh,
that's
back,
better.
back
Keep it
towards
back.
you. Yeah.
This one here was my gun crew. The guys, and I could tell you how many are in the crew then.
Whereabouts are you in there?
Whereabouts am I in here? Let me get my glasses on. Korea was a long time ago. Whereabouts am I? I was probably taking the picture. I was.
Here's one of you.
Brazizi. This kid's name was Brazizi. This right? He was from New York. This kid was Brazizi.
Okay.
This was our sergeant in charge of our battery, but I can't tell you what his name was.
So you had your battery consisted of a sergeant and how many men then? Did you say approximately
2, 4, 6, probably a crew of 8
8? Mm-hmm.
on each battery.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
These were the guns that we operated. There were 155 millimeter howitzers. Can you see it up there?
Yep.
Now, did you have a forward observer
Oh yeah.
who called in
missions.
coordinates to you, or okay?
Yeah, called in missions. This was just posed. This picture right here, you know, looks like a South Korean, but you know, one guy's holding a rifle in front of him. And this is what you do when you're young, you know. You don't, no seriousness, you know. Take a picture of me holding this bomb up. You know?
Okay.
I wish I could see some of the guys that I served with over there.
Now, you never kept in contact with anyone after the war?
You know, this was our bunker in one of the positions we lived in.
Yeah, well, if you hold it to Wayne.
Oh, back.
Back up.
Back. Okay.
Now, you had to dig your own bunkers, or were they already there? when you
No,
came
we
in?
built them, and then we tried to go out to, you know, the company would go out once a week and something. About once a week, we'd pull out of our own main area, and we'd go to just a strange place where there might be a hill, you know, and we'd set up all over again. Just dig our trails in, because you can see on these photos here that these trails, these gun trails, there's a big log behind these gun trails here. So that when the gun fires, there's a lot of recoil. And if you didn't have these trails dug in, the gun would run away with you.
Okay.
And we'd set up and fire again, and I often wonder what the object was, and so I asked one of the guys one time, he said, what's the object of this? Pulling up stakes and going someplace? It's just the idea of giving the enemy the idea that we had more artillery than we actually did. There's the kid that was a good friend of mine, the black kid. I'm telling you, Oh, what am I showing you for? Hold it up again.
Oops.
This kid right here, he was a super guy. Just as pleasant as can be.
Okay.
I wish I could remember his name. Highsmith. Highsmith was his name. That was his last name. But you can see the smile on his face.
Where was he from? Do you remember?
I think he was from the Carolinas, I think. I'm not sure. See, there's me. You know, like I say, young guys, look, I'm thinking to myself, oh, this is going to impress my girlfriend, you know. This shell weighs 105 pounds, and I'm putting it over my head, you know.
Did your hernia ever bother you?
Oh, no.
When you loaded, or?
No.
Now, in a gun crew, what basically was your?
We were supposed to know all the positions, but I was, I did all the positions. In fact, there was, but lots of times, you know, we manned the phones all night long. Naturally, one guy mans the phones. You got a headset on, you're connected to the exec pit. You know, and if you started getting incoming fire, then we had observers out there in the airplanes and so on and so forth that could tell us pinpoint where the fire was coming from, and we counter battery, try to knock them out before they could knock us out. And it was really quite interesting. But my main job, I would say, was probably, well, I worked the tray. You know, you got a guy on each side of the tray where you set the tray with a projectile on it, on the lip of the breech. And then we had two more guys on a ramrod, and they take that ramrod and get behind it and shove the thing and seat the shell in the chamber. And then we had the powder man that would come along, and he'd find out what and all this was coming over to the phones. The guy got the phone on. They say charge 1 or charge 7 or whatever they might be, and he'd break the increment and stick it in behind the shell. And the number 1 man would close the breech, and it was a step breech, and he was generally the one that pulled it off, you know. And that recoil was, well, you know, that would recoil 4 or 5 feet. And it was something, it really was. It was a good experience, I think.
How often did you have to clean the tubes out? Did you?
Every time.
Every time.
Every time you find one, you swabbed them out. This was in one of the positions where this was the exec pit. And you can see how that's dug in. That's where all the commands came from. There's the kid right there, and his name was Brazzi. He's the one that gave me the hard time. Right there. No, not Brazzi, Gonzalez. This was Nick Brazzi. He was from New York. It does come back a little bit, doesn't it? This right here is a cemetery in Korea. They buried all their people, setting up, I guess, in a mound of dirt. These were some of the children right here that, oh, they were poor little urchins, I'm telling you. You know, they didn't have any shoes, or, you know, used to give them mitten liners and stuff like that to keep their hands warm, and war is a nasty thing. These were their monuments here, stone monuments. Honor their dead, I guess. There's a pile of powder canisters right there. That's what the powder came in.
Now, after you had a pile like that, what happened? What did they do with them?
Oh, they'd send trucks around, and they'd throw on the trucks, and I don't know what they'd do with them after that.
They'd just take them off your
Right.
site. So.
Yeah. There's your netting that used to go over the guns there, the camouflage nettings. Yeah. And a couple guys sitting by a gravesite, take my picture. I don't know what for.
Now, did you ever get any R&R while you were over there?
Yes.
Where did you go for that?
Japan. Yeah, they gave us a week over there, and this is what somebody's. This is a picture of one of my buddies in Japan. Oh, oh, you won't move it back. I'm going to drive these guys nuts.
No, you're not.
Okay. Got it.
My sons and I went to Turning Stone one time, and this has nothing to do with the service, but we went to Turning Stone to do a little gambling. And we sat at the poker table, and of course, I've never played poker in a casino or anything like that, so I'm picking up my cards, and the guy said, the dealer says, don't touch the cards. Well, he must have told me that 20 times, and because I'd always pick up my cards, don't touch the cards. Finally, he said, look, I'm not going to let you play if you pick up your cards. There's a group of the Koreans out in the rice fields. You know, this was an outpost. I was up there on the outpost, and you wash in your helmet, and you eat in your helmet, and you sit on your helmet, and good deal like camping. There's my gun crew again there. This is how this machinery right here, they take the rice stalks. You know, after they got the rice off them, and they take them and this thing right, this is how they took the rice off the stalks. It was just a big drum with a lot of nails through it, and they had a treadle, and they'd keep that drum going like that and hold the stalks off. Would beat the rice off, and then they take and make rugs out of the rice stalks. Was it really amazing?
Did you ever get food from the local people? Or?
Yeah, but I never ate it.
You never did.
Most of it was fish heads, I think. There's another one of our bunkers there. This was our gun pit, or you know what you could see of it. This is the place where we had the bunker was on the opposite side of the hill the gun pit was. There's our trip to the barber shop out in the field. They just shaved your head.
Now, how did you? What kind of bathing facilities did you have, and how often would you be able to do that?
Most of our showers were man-made. You know what I'm saying? We take a barrel,
Okay.
fill it with barrel, and then you tip the barrel or poke holes in the bottom of it, you know, and put some kind of a stopper there when a guy would pour water into the barrel while you're taking a shower, and another guy would hold a string or something like that and rinse the soap off you. You know, you were lucky if you showered once a week, I think. You know, maybe it's just that I didn't want to. Water was too cold or something. I don't
So
remember.
you never had heated water, then heated showers out in the field?
Not down in the field, no.
How about washing your clothes?
You beat them with a rock. You know, once again, use your dinner plate, which is your helmet. Beating my clothes and didn't really, you know, no, I'd said a little extreme. We didn't do that. Well, we'd take them to the creek or wherever there was water, you know, we could. The laundromat didn't come around too often to take our stuff and clean them up. There was one of the tents we lived in when we didn't have to live in the bunker, but you can see how the sandbags are all around the outside of the tent.
How many lived in a single tent? Your whole
regular
battery crew?
A regular crew, a battery. 8 to 10 guys, whatever. Some of the gun pits that we made up were, I mean, they were slick. We had rock gardens and everything in them. Here's one right here where Nick was sitting on kind of like a rock garden made out of sandbags, and here's steps that we made out of ammunition boxes that went up to our tent. See these, just to hold the gravel in place. Because that's when we weren't fighting. That's about all we had to do was take care of our rock gardens. You know what I'm saying? Plant our flowers, and they were generally weeds. This kid, I remember his name too. His name was Rod Cameron. And this kid, he always was after me every night because I don't know if he was an alcoholic, but he'd take a bottle of liquor. And where he even got the liquor. And he used to want me, Buck, sit up with me tonight, will you, and drink and help me drink this liquor. I don't even like liquor. So I said, no, I'm sorry, Rod, I'm going to bed. And he'd finish a bottle of liquor just about every night. But he was never inebriated. And he always amazed me. But he was a skinny little guy that didn't amount to much, you know. But he had a good sense of humor, and I liked him.
How did you feel about your officers?
You never had very much to do about the officers. I remember one time we had an officer that we was pulling out and going to another location. and I happened to be, our sergeant was bad buggered up, so I happened to be the leader of my battery. So we went out during the day with the truck driver to see where we was going to, because we was going to go in at night.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we got to the place, I found out where gun 2 was going to be, which was my gun. And I said, and so I put an aiming stake, or just a piece of rod, metal rod, right where they wanted the gun barrel to point. And we was in just a little bit of incline like this, so you couldn't see the muzzle glass again. And so when we went out that night, the CO, our CO, talking about the COs, he said, I'll give a case of beer to the fastest gun in place and it's ready to fire. You know. So when we got out there, now gun 2 was the last one to pull in the emplacement. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and then 2 came in. We was next to the last one to pull into the emplacement. Rather than have the trucks back the gun up, because it's like backing up a trailer, you know. I had my truck driver, I got out of the truck and he's got these little lights, you know, blackout lights, and I said, follow me when I get out of the truck. So I walked up the hill and I had him pull in place. Well, when I did that, I fell into a hole because I couldn't see anything. I thought he was going to run over me. But he followed me and he come right around and we dropped that gun, the point of that gun, right over that aiming stake there, that stake that I stuck in the ground when he was out there. And believe it or not, my gun crew, they were just putting in the electric lines to the exec pit. They started at 1 putting in the gun lines, the electric lines to the gun pit, or to the exec pit, and they were just finished up 2. And my crew had got the gun jacked up, got the holes dug for the trails, put the aiming stake out in place so that the gun can be aimed at a certain stake, you know. And you was only allowed something like I don't know, 1 or 2 degrees off on this sighting. And I said, so I gets on the phone. The con man just put the lines in, so I got on the phone and I put the headset on and I called the exec pit and I said, gun 2 is safe and ready to fire. And the guy says, okay. And then a couple seconds later he comes back on the phone. He says, what'd you say? And I said, gun 2 is safe and ready to fire. He says, you're kidding me. It was something like 20 minutes. We set a record. And so consequently, the battalion commander come down to our place. And first, naturally, he's coming up to me and I'm shaking. What did I do wrong? You know, this type of thing. And he says, who's in charge here? And I said, I am, sir. And he says, and he brought a crew with him. And he had this crew go all over thing. He checked the trails, checked the aiming stake. He did everything. Checked to see if the gun was, you know, jacked up on his flow. And he says, you're a half a degree off on the aiming stake. I said, is that bad? He says, holy smoke. We got the case of beer, to make the long story short, because we was in less than 20 minutes. We had that gun set up and safe and ready to fire. So it was, you know, it was kind of cops. Believe it or not, then they gave me a meritorious promotion from PFC to Corporal. That's how I got my meritorious promotion. Which I was quite proud of, but they never gave me any more.
Now I noticed in your form you said you had a smashed finger. What happened?
That was a mission that I tried to run on my own because I was working the gun one night. I was on the phones one night, and of course from the exec pit it comes down fire mission, King battery, adjust. But then they'd take one gun, and they would say gun to adjust. So at that I'm supposed to call this 30 yards, and I have to holler it out, gun to adjust, fire mission, you know, like this. You know, I don't know whether we had a beer party the night before or what, but, you know, I couldn't arouse anybody. And they're giving me information all the time. This has got to go on the site, you know, 10 degrees left or whatever the thing is, elevation is so much and so on. So I'm trying to work this whole thing with a headset on and wires coming out of it, you know. I'm trying to fuse the round and get the powder charged and the whole thing. I got it all set up and everything, and right to the tune of Dixie. And when the barrel was in the proper position, the barrel was coming right down one of the trails, you know. And so when I tried to close the breech, you know, there's a handle that sticks right up, and you put your primer in there and everything. And when I closed the breech, my finger, this in here, got caught was caught between the handle, and it don't lock up in place until this intercepted breech locks in place. And it got between the handle and the trail, and it just smashed it. Boy, it just smashed it good. Fact is, it's loose right now. See, it's just nothing. That's not old age either. That's smashed meat. And so, you know, numbness set in. I finished the only one shot, I guess, and I finished the shot all by myself. Couldn't wake up the gun crew. And they wanted to give me a Purple Heart. I said, a Purple Heart for a smashed finger? No thanks, I don't want it. So I don't know.
Now, where were you discharged?
I was discharged in Bayonne, New Jersey.
Okay, yeah, you said that, okay. When you went home, did you have a GI Bill that you could use, and did you use that at all?
They had a lot of things. I didn't even keep my insurance. They had a $10,000 policy I could have kept. They gave, I could have gone to school. They could have bought a home for me, or, you know, financed or whatever. And I never took advantage of any of it. And not you know, that I was taking advantage of it. I just never used it. It's young enough so that, you know, I'm self-sufficient. I don't need this and that and so on and so forth.
I don't know. We usually ask World War II veterans. They had a 5220 club where they receive $20 a week unemployment insurance for 52 weeks. Did they have something like that after Korea?
Not that I know of.
I didn't know that.
Not that I know of.
Okay. And you said you did not stay in contact with anyone that was in service. Did you join any veterans organizations?
No, I was obligated to 4 more years of service. I think it was 4 more years, or 6 more years when the two actions. The obligation was 8 years there. No, it must have been 5 years because I spent 3 years in the active service.
So you didn't? Did you join the VFW or American
No.
Legion or anything? You never did. Okay. How do you think your time in the service had an effect on your life?
Well, like I say, I think I've always been able to adjust in most any situation in my life, and I don't think it had any adverse effect or anything like that, you know.
Any positive effect?
I thought the experience was fantastic, because I think what it does to a young man, and I think it's necessary today, I think every man should be drafted or brought into the service just to let him grow up, because we got a lot of youth walking around that has no direction at all, and I think that gave me direction. I don't know how I'm supposed to say this in a video or not.
That's what we asked. I asked you. You have any questions?
No.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your interview.
You're welcome.